Hi guys, welcome to week 2 of grammar in remote learning. This week our lesson is on pronoun cases. That up so I'm out of your way. Pronoun cases and intensive pronouns. So we did pronoun cases last week. This is going to be a bit of a review. And then we're also going to talk about intensive pronouns, which are just another type of pronoun to add to subjective, objective, and possessive. This is covering our first grade or part of our first grammar standard. Pronouns are the part of speech that we're responsible for in 6th grade that you should leave 6th grade mastering. And so we're going to be doing a lot with pronouns these first 4 weeks. This just kind of continues that. And in order to be successful, or we'll know we're successful when we are able to identify errors in pronoun usage, use pronouns correctly, make sure that we have agreement between the antecedent and the pronoun. So that's what this week is going to be. I just want to do a quick reminder that, you have to watch the whole video before you start any of the practices. I noticed last week a bunch of people were having to do almost like 100 questions on IXL. That shouldn't be happening. And when I looked, I saw that we were doing IXLs without having watched the video. So that it's going to be hard. The video, I know it feels kind of weird to be watching, but it's just like if I was teaching in the classroom. I wouldn't give you the assignment and say, hey, do this before I've even taught the lesson. So that's what this part is. I've got the questions built in, so you do need to be paying attention. And when you finish the video, make sure there's a turn in button at the end. Just make sure you turn it in. If you're giving answers and you're trying, I'm going to count it as your grade is good for this, even if the answers are wrong. The only reason you would miss points is if you're not doing the whole video, if you're writing what's clearly nonsense, or if you are writing things like IDK or leaving something blank or the same answer repeated over and over again. If it's things that would not be okay if we were practicing in the classroom, then they're not okay on your video lesson. So just like if we were in class and Mrs. Mutzbauer or I was walking around checking, seeing how we were doing our practice with the lesson, you need to make sure that you're giving that same attention to the lesson. So again, we are going to be doing pronoun cases and intensive pronouns. This is hitting the first part of our first grammar standard for 6th grade. Pronouns are the part of speech that 6th graders are expected to master. So we just want to make sure that we're looking at all the different types of pronouns, and we'll know that we're successful when we're able to use pronouns correctly, when we have pronoun agreement with its antecedent. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to review a bit from last week, and then we're going to add in intensive pronouns. All right, so first of all, let's think about what's a pronoun. See what you remember. I keep covering up parts of the presentation, so I'll just keep moving myself around. So Mrs. Mutzbauer gives us the they, them, that's a pronoun. But what actually is a pronoun? Not an example of a pronoun, what a pronoun is. Give you a second to think about that. All right, so if you were remembering right, a pronoun is a word that replaces a noun, and we use them to make our writing more clear. We don't want to say Mrs. Stratton expects Mrs. Stratton's students to watch Mrs. Stratton's lesson to do Mrs. Stratton's assignments. We would replace Mrs. Stratton with her to make our writing a little clearer and a lot more concise, meaning short and sweet. I'm not always good at concise speaking. All right, quick review of the pronoun cases. You've got your subjective when it's the subject of a sentence, I, you, we, he, she, they, it. And one we didn't throw in last week was who. And you might use that one, Mrs. Stratton, who likes to read. I use the pronoun who to take the place of Mrs. Stratton. Then we have our objective pronouns, me, you, him, her, it, us, them, whom. Again, we threw in that whom, and this is where it's the object of the sentence. So if you said something like, you told me about the homework, then you did the telling and you told me. Notice this becomes whom. This is a pretty common error in when should we use who and when should we use whom. A friend of mine gave me the best advice I'd ever gotten in terms of grammar, because I never knew when to use whom. You use it, if you would use him in the sentence, you use whom. They both end with that M. And then we have the possessive, my and mine, your and yours, our and ours, his, her and hers, their and theirs, its and whose. Remember, to know if I use the your or the yours, I would just read the sentence and whatever makes sense in the sentence. All right, so last week we talked a little bit about antecedents, but we want to make really sure that we're clear on that word. So a pronoun replaces an antecedent. Antecedents must be a noun. So if something asks you which is the antecedent, if it's not a person, place, or thing, don't pick that word because it's not the antecedent. Antecedents and pronouns have to match in number, in gender, male or female, and case. So let's watch this short video on pronoun and antecedents to give us a little better understanding.
Learning upgrade. Now listen up. A pronoun takes the place of a noun. The antecedent is the noun which the pronoun replaces or refers to. The pronoun and antecedent must match or agree. When Sally goes home, she eats dinner. She is the pronoun. Sally is the antecedent since Sally is one woman. The pronoun she is in agreement. The students went to their classroom. There is the pronoun. Students is the antecedent since.
Okay, I'm going to pause it right there to give a little clarification because this is a tricky one sometimes. It's a group of students and they went to their classroom because they all share the same classroom. But if you had something like each of the students put on their hat, that would be incorrect because they don't all share the same hat. So if it said each of the students put on, you would say his or her hat because they're not all sharing that one hat.
Students is many people. The pronoun there is in agreement. Mark drives his car to work. His is the pronoun. Mark is the antecedent since Mark is one man. The pronoun his is in agreement. A pronoun takes the place of a noun.
All right, we're going to stop right there. So that said, a pronoun takes the place of a noun. Real quick, I want you to answer the question, what is the name that we give the noun that is replaced by the pronoun? So answer that question real quick, and then we'll move on. Okay, you're going to go back for me. There we go. So hopefully you answered antecedent. The name of the noun that the pronoun replaces is an antecedent. All right, and I talked about this in the video. So for singular nouns, be sure to use the correct, or no, sorry, this wasn't the part I talked about in the video, but it goes along with it. So for singular nouns, just be sure to use the correct gender to replace the noun. So if you are unsure of the gender, you can say things like he, but you can put S in parentheses in front of it. That would mean he, but it could be a girl too. We're not quite sure. Or you could say him or her or he or she. You could also do like his/hers or he/he. You can use these forms right here with any subjective, objective, or possessive pronoun. But we do want to make sure that we don't just assume the gender of if we're not sure. So if the noun is singular, also don't use a plural pronoun. That's what I was talking about in the video with the, if it's each student, then you want to not use that their or they. So that's just kind of a review of nouns of just subjective, objective, and possessive pronouns and the antecedent that they replace. So let's do some review questions. During early rehearsals, an actor may forget he, his, or their lines. Which pronoun best completes the sentence? So, depending on what you chose, the correct answer would be he, an act, or sorry, not he. An actor may forget his lines, the lines that belong to him. And the reason we know to choose his is because typically an actor is a male. If it's a girl, we say actress. So you would choose his on that one. Being persnickety there. All right. Nobody understood what they, he or she, or them had to do to succeed in the course. Which pronoun best completes the sentence? So you should have chosen, this might have been a tricky one. Nobody understood what he or she had to do to succeed in the course. That would be the correct answer. It sounds a little weird. We don't normally follow that grammatic rule correctly when we're speaking, and I'm even guilty of it. I would have said nobody understood what they had to do to succeed in the course. But if you're in a course, you're working independently, and you would do he, she. No single person in the classroom knew what they had to do to succeed in the course. When computers crash, they need to be fixed immediately. What is the antecedent in this sentence? So hopefully you chose computers. The pronoun is they, and it's saying that the computers need to be fixed immediately. So computers is the antecedent. Each teacher turned in his or her, their, or our grades to the principal. Which pronoun or pronouns best completes the sentence? You should have chose his or her because the teachers each have their own individual set of grades to turn in. So each teacher is turning in his or her. If they all shared one of something, then you could use their. It belonged to all of them. A typical shopper doesn't like it when blank are constantly bothered by a salesperson. What pronoun would best complete the sentence? You would choose he or she, or some version, however you wrote that, he/she, he with the S in parentheses in front of that, because we don't know if the shopper is a boy or girl, but we know it's a singular, so it's he or she. All right, you see our pivot. That's a big word in education right now because we have to switch gears. So that was our review over subjective, objective, and possessive pronouns. Hopefully you did okay. We're going to switch into intensive. Intensive pronouns are pretty easy, so I don't think you'll have too much of a problem with them. All right, so let's watch, again, short little video to introduce intensive pronouns.
English with Ladybug. Intensive pronouns. Remember that pronouns replace nouns and noun phrases. An intensive pronoun, also known as an intensive reflexive pronoun, is a word that intensifies a noun or noun phrase. Intensive pronouns usually go after the noun or pronoun.
They usually go. They don't have to. They usually go, though.
This is done to make the previous noun stronger. The intensive pronouns are myself, yourself, himself, herself, itself, ourselves, yourselves, and themselves.
Okay, so intensive pronouns come after the noun or even another pronoun, and they just serve to kind of emphasize that, to make more of a point on it. So they add emphasis to the subject of a sentence. They end in self or selves. And then here's just an example. Mrs. Dorfler sent out the announcements herself. It just adds emphasis to that fact that Mrs. Dorfler is the one sending out the announcements. Intensive pronouns are very similar to reflexive pronouns, which we're not going to talk too much about, but you might see it come up. A reflexive pronoun still ends in self or self, but they look a little different because they're the same as the subject of the sentence and the object of the sentence. So it might be something like, he believed in himself. That's a reflexive pronoun. Kind of the difference there is that if I take out the himself, the sentence doesn't make sense. It becomes, he believes in, and then I don't know what. So that's reflexive. An intensive pronoun, you can take an intensive pronoun out of a sentence and the sentence will still make sense. Mrs. Dorfler sent out the announcements. If I don't put the herself in there, it still makes sense. It's just that herself adds, again, that emphasis on the subject, so it just makes it a little stronger. You won't see much about reflexive pronouns, but I did want to point out the pronouns themselves are the same. It's more about how they're used, and we're really going to focus in on intensive pronouns. So, which is true about intensive pronouns? All right, for that one, you should have selected all of the above. All of those things are true about intensive pronouns. They end in self or selves, they add emphasis to the subject of a sentence, and the sentence will still make sense if they're not in there. So if you're thinking, well, why do I want to include it then? It makes it stronger. So I'm thinking of an instance where you're angry with someone because they didn't help. Well, I went ahead and I did it myself. You're just adding emphasis to that. So let's do some practice. Did you discover it yourself? Which word is the intensive pronoun there? Hopefully you chose yourself. It's adding emphasis to you. I'm asking, did you discover it yourself? Maybe you were with a group and I want to know. It's adding that emphasis to you. He himself bought a present for his parents. Which word is the intensive pronoun? Hopefully you selected himself. Again, just meaning that it's adding that emphasis to he. He didn't work with his siblings. He himself did it. All right, we blank need to be better prepared. Which intensive pronoun will best complete the sentence? So not just any word, which intensive pronouns? And it should have been ourselves. We ourselves need to be better prepared, adding that emphasis to that we. They blank have dressed properly for the occasion. Which intensive pronoun will best complete the sentence? And you should have chosen themselves. They themselves have dressed properly for the occasion. Again, just adding that emphasis. Did you make the cake? Which intensive pronoun will best complete that sentence? Yourself is what you should have put in there. Did you make the cake yourself? Oh, that's just an extra slide. That's the end of our video. Now you are going to go on to do your practices. Let me know if you have any questions.